people don't get is how the ceasefire is working. First, Iran is coming in at 12 hours and then Israel's coming in 24 hours later. So people didn't understand the time frame.
Yeah.
And the one missile that he was saying that didn't hit a apartment building in Israel and killed like families. Yeah. So so it definitely hit. And you know, you don't shoot off a ballistic missile by mistake. It's not that's your pocket dial someone. You know. So it was a bizarre thing. You know, most people, you know, I kept getting messages like, they're shooting, I thought we had peace. It's like, no. Read the message, put the timeline, do the time change to their periods. You know, it's 9 hours apart. So, you know, you got to think about that.
All Canadian families, we are on the Titanic. The iceberg hasn't hit yet, so we're not sinking. If we don't shift course, that iceberg is coming for us.
I'm not planning on leaving. I'm fighting. We want to make this country incredibly great.
We begin to see that it really isn't about diversity. It is about punishing the people who perform beyond the mean.
For people who don't care, where do you see Canada going?
Oh, it's catastrophic. It is that bad.
What is the carbon tax doing to lower carbon emissions?
Exactly.
I love this country. I was born in this country. I believe in what this country stands for. I believe in its people. I believe as a place opportunity for all to come and live. But the path that we're on is not working. And we are not going to be what we're supposed to be if we continue along this path.
Yeah.
Well, hello, citizens. Welcome to our show. Citizen, hope you guys are doing well wherever you are watching us from. Lots of stuff to get to this week. We're going to do a bit more of a macro focus on the world. We'll get to a little bit of Canada's involvement on the world stage, but there has been, as everyone is aware, unless you have been living under a rock, there has been a lot of words being thrown around about world wars, conflicts, obviously in the Middle East. You've got other conflicts still ongoing with Russia, Ukraine, what's happening when it comes to Israel, Iran, U.S. U.S. was dropping a bunch of bunker buster bombs on Iran over the weekend. We want to analyze that. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in at a NATO summit, I believe, right now. And he's made some comments as well regarding that. So I want to take a look at that. But I want to analyze, and we've got a good friend on the show who's been with us several times, Kirk Lubimov, and we're going to be chatting through what does this mean for the Middle East? Is diplomacy something that's actually going to be able to work out with President Trump and the strength that he is showing? Can they have peace through strength, or is it going to fall through? What's happening with Israel and Netanyahu? Lots of pieces, lots of things going on. Kirk, before we get there, how are you, my friend?
Pretty
Welcome
good.
to the show.
Thank you for having me again.
What's going on in your world? Tell us quickly.
Well, you know, it's summertime. Things are starting to slow down a little bit. But, you know, here in Calgary, we have another election coming up for the municipal level. So
thoughts on that? For all Calgarians listening?
It's an important election, right? Because it's we need to win the votes in, you know, to be able to pass things. Essentially, the left side that's been ignoring citizens has a free way to do mostly what they want right now. So the next election is very paramount to Calgary's future.
What are the dates again? How soon is it coming?
I believe it's in October.
Okay, and that's so Gondek is running again for mayor?
Yeah, running for election.
And is there who would be the main competitors?
I'm not sure if anyone else will enter the mayoral race right now. But Farkas is in it, who ran last time and performed dismally. And it's essentially the same crew, really. Jeff Davison will be in it again. There's a new guy. So the interesting part about this election is the first time we're going to have a party system.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how the citizens, how the voters will react to it.
I actually am not too aware of this. Can you explain what's changing for it then?
Yeah, so for this election, I believe BC and Vancouver and stuff, there's a party system where for municipal elections, you know how we have party system federally, provincially. So they changed some stuff and they allowed it for Edmonton and Calgary for this next election. So there'll be a few parties running candidates in this election. So, which is interesting because you essentially don't really want a party system on the municipal side because you want people to represent your community.
Yeah.
One of the unique things that Calgary has that many places in Canada don't really have, we have community associations.
Yes.
So we have a very loud and very effective local representation that the council offices should be working with. Right? They shouldn't be adhering to I guess a political party, rah-rah kind of thing. There is very strong local representation that knows what needs to be done, and essentially councilor's job is to listen and get things done. Hasn't really been happening for a lot of places, and the city is trying to kind of maneuver around community associations because they a lot of the things that they're trying to pass is to speed up stuff based on ideological processes that requires less input from citizens, so less democracy, less say what you have going on in the neighborhood. Like we have the blanket upzoning, they're trying to do other things. So it's a very pivotal moment for Calgarians, because otherwise we have this centralization of power into the city hall to unelected people. So what's happening in Calgary this year is probably more important for Calgary than the next provincial or federal election. So it's really important.
I'm glad you brought that up. So for all the Calgarians who are watching, be aware it is October 2025. The election is coming up. And that's going to, I'm really glad. I'm going to dive into that a bit more because I knew it was coming up, but didn't realize there's some key shifts happening, especially with Calgary being such a beautiful, progressive, and growing city. Like there is so much opportunity that Calgary has to offer. Obviously, within what's happening potentially with Alberta and the movements there, which I think are actually slowing down a little bit. But Calgary, that's going to be very important to see because we need Calgary to continue to thrive. Forward.
100%. It's one of the only cities in Canada. Alberta, into last quarter has grew faster than all of Canada population size. So we're one of the only places in Canada that has positive growth. So we need to make sure that we're developing accordingly, right? So building roads properly. We have things getting fixed. We have, facilities for kids to play hockey. We have proper housing planning. So the next election has to make sure that that's done in accordance with how citizens want their neighborhoods to be built out as well. So it's a very important election.
Okay, well, let's move on to the geopolitics of the world, right? We have some big players. President Donald Trump and the U.S. military have entered the scene this last weekend. If you guys are not up to speed with what's going on, April through June, essentially, there was talks between the U.S. and Iran that kind of collapsed. From early April to mid-June, they were talking 4 rounds of negotiations as they were talking through uranium enrichment, sanctions, and all that type of stuff. June 11th and 12th is when the tensions really started to spike as they found out Iran was non-compliant with safeguards, which I'm sure probably a lot of people already knew, right? I'm guessing. And anyways, U.S. embassies in the regions, they began to evacuate over that time period. June 13th is when Israel, and I want to ask you some questions after, but Israel, this is when they launched their big mission. I think it was called Operation Rising Lion. Does that sound right? And they launched major airstrikes with Mossad drone support throughout Iranian nuclear sites, missiles, and different IRGC targets, which was also, I think, on Fordow? That's where the nuclear site is, or Fordo?
Yeah, that's where they dropped the bunker buster.
That's where the bunker buster was eventually dropped. Anyways, and then this past weekend, June 21st, 22nd, the U.S., there was an interesting announcement a couple days before. They said that Trump's going to take 2 weeks. I'm not sure if you said, if Trump's going to take 2 weeks to decide whether they're going to get involved with the situation. I think that was a bit of a misleading because within 2 days they dropped a couple B-2 bombers flew left, and they dropped a bunch of bunker busters throughout Iran on nuclear sites, what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And then basically Trump was calling to the table. U.S. intervened. I know the UK also mentioned at one point that if U.S. gets involved, they might get involved as well. Anyways, that's where we're at. And then Trump basically said we need to have peace. As of today, said that they negotiated. It's the end of the 12-day war. It should be called the 12-day war, and we're going to end it there. And then he was pretty pissed off. We'll show some comments later because I think Israel and Iran both broke the ceasefire that Trump said had happened.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of the timeline. But first off, overall thoughts, reactions on this?
Well, the timeline is actually kind of interesting because the first negotiations that you brought up to, the negotiations with Iran to stop them from enrichment and all this has been going on for 20, 30 years for one way or another. Yep. They've been giving out lots of billions of dollars by Obama, by Biden.
That's right.
It goes back years. And, you don't build all those facilities unless you're planning to do enrichment. That's essentially the bottom line of that. And there is no like retail consumer facing reason why you would enrich in uranium. So they're building it obviously for a weapon purpose.
Yeah.
And you need to, to get to the enrichment part, you need a lot of space, a lot of facility, a lot of technology, and then to put it into essentially a weapon mode. But the enrichment part of it, you can actually do it in your garage if you have enough energy. So that part doesn't actually take a lot of space or anything. So, when you look at the actual like general nuclear bombs, like the actual middle part of it that's compresses and explodes and everything is the size of a soccer ball. So everything else is just, built around it to facilitate that. But when you brought up the timeline from the 60 days to April, the war launched exactly at the 60th day deadline.
That's right.
So it was
because Trump gave them a 60-day deadline.
Yeah.
Obviously 60 days earlier. And that deadline was to come to the table to negotiate a new deal, essentially, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When Trump was campaigning, was trying to get reelected, he obviously didn't want to be a war president. And this is not a war. This is a mission so far from the U.S. We don't know how else they'll get involved. We'll see how Iran decides. But he took action that nobody else had the guts to do it.
Sure.
And just to end it. It requires a lot of self-sacrifice on the political side to do that. Now he's kind of pivot, like this is done. They're getting to a peace. He tweeted again or posted on Truth Social. Iran will never get a nuclear bomb and never get enriched. This is the stance that we need around the world, and the U.S. intervention in it is absolutely paramount to move the Middle East towards peace. It's Iran is Iran's Islamic regime is the biggest terror sponsor in the world.
That's right.
Right? They sponsor Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, everyone around there that creates all the trouble. The money is coming from Iran.
Yeah.
And Qatar. Qatar is mostly involved on the propaganda side in North America.
Okay.
But the joke has always been, where's the capital of Gaza? And the joke is in a Qatari bank account.
That's right.
So what they did is they're getting rid of this whole system that's, holding the Middle East essentially.
Mr. Jeremy Prest, welcome to the show. The show goes on. We'll give him a second to get. Keep going, Kirk.
I've been listening the whole time, so I'm like, I got lots to say. I've never felt so like I gotta say something.
The names came up.
There you go.
Look at that for you.
Boom.
There you joins the show. Keep going, Kirk.
So the place we're moving to in the Middle East is so awesome from a progress point of view because Hamas is essentially gone.
Yeah.
Hezbollah is essentially almost non-existent.
Yeah.
And now if Iran, the Persian people, it's up to them really to rise up at the end. If they can get rid of the Ayatollah, their essentially Islamic regime, it'll be absolutely a game changer for the Middle East, and we'll never see the old Middle East again because people just move on from that. So it's a very exciting future that's I see there, at least if people want it.
So do you think the Iranian regime is on the brink of collapse? Like, is there enough instability now that's happening? Or because there's a couple reports that have come out in the last 12 hours of 16 specifically military-grade trucks that went to Fordo beforehand and was seen leaving.
Before it got bombed.
Like suggesting that there was a bunch of movement. Bari Barry Weiss reported that, I think, earlier today from the Free Press. But then CNN came out with a report today stating that, because Trump said utterly destroyed, the program's done. CNN said the opposite. It's not done. It's actually just maybe delayed. And Caroline Levitt, who's a press secretary, as of 2 hours ago, was saying this alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but it was still leaked to CNN by somebody. And anyway, he's saying that it is wrong and that they have completely destroyed it. So it's a lot of back and forth. Like, it's kind of, who do you believe in that?
There's a lot of satellite images coming up, though. I don't know if you guys have seen those, but like the entrances. So there's one building that you're in particular that is still fully intact that you can see. It doesn't look like it's been touched, but that's not apparently where they actually bombed. There was entrances to the underground caves, which is why they use bunker busters, because they're not aiming for a surface target.
No, and you don't use bunker busters for
surface. Yeah.
So the way they work, they don't explode right away. They dig in
through 100 and something feet of.
Yeah, on pretty solid rock, they can get up to like 40 to 100 to 200 feet underground. So and then they explode. So they like have a delayed diffuse essentially.
Yeah.
Like to
30,000 pounds, right? It's meant to push through.
Yeah. That's the reason they used the B-2s. That's why one of the reasons Israel needed them is because the U.S. is the only military that can carry those. There's nobody else can carry those heavy bombs. Yeah. So,
but to your point though earlier, because you're mentioning that it doesn't take a lot of space to actually enrich uranium, and this was the idea that if the trucks got key material out, they might have destroyed the place where they were doing it, but you actually can do it elsewhere if you don't need a lot of space, if you're doing it for military or weapons purposes, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing it for a nuclear reactor, obviously you need giant space because you need lots of the material, but for a weapon. Anyways, my question is, do you think they're on the brink of collapse? Like President Trump said, I'll show this clip later. Regime change means chaos. We don't want chaos. We want them to come to the table and have a deal.
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
It's a bizarre take because, Trump has really pivoted towards trying to win a Nobel Peace Prize award. This is essentially where his space is stuck at. Pakistan is trying to nominate him. Someone else from the U.S. has tried to nominate
even one
him.
of the Israeli representatives too.
So it's so the unfortunate thing sometimes when it gets stuck in his head is just like even with the Canadian tariffs trade, it's like things that make absolutely no sense and have no realism is like he keeps repeating it, but it's not true. So the issue is with this, there is no regime change in Iran. It's you still dealing with a terrorist state-sponsored government.
Yeah.
So if you want terrorism to stop, the people that are yelling death to infidels, death to America, death to Israel, and all that stuff, you need to get rid of those people. Now, it's not exactly...
Oh, so you're saying because he's focused on Peace Prize, he just kind of wants to put this out and let it be as calm as it can be.
So, but it's like, no, if you really want the problem, the fundamental problem is the belief.
It's an ideology.
It's the ideology, right? Yeah. So nothing will change. You're going to get rid of their bombs. They've been preparing for this for 30 years, right? They've been building up ballistic stock. They've been building missiles, rockets, everything for 30 years, including this uranium move. You don't build into a whole mountainside because you're doing it for peace. You do it because it's a 100%. Shield, right? Yeah. And Iran has a very difficult geography, so that's why it doesn't make any sense to invade it by land. But they're using their geography for their strength. Like those, one of the arguments with this bunker buster is that it can't penetrate far enough into that mountainside. But it could collapse on it, right? That's the hard thing with satellite imagery because they blow up inside, they don't blow outside.
And so that's what the imagery showed is that the building was intact, but like I said, not the target. It was actually there was two major tunnels that you could see that they would bring in vehicles. It was like the sides of a roadway, and both those entrances were completely collapsed. And so CNN is being ignorant, I think.
Well, it's just nobody knows. I just wish they would.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I wish we would have filmed that. Like, why would you do this and not film it? Like, come on, guys. But it's.
I'll bet you they did. It makes me wonder because they. I don't remember the Secretary of Defense's name.
Caroline Levitt.
No, of defense.
Oh, Secretary of Defense.
Anyway, they were talking about how they were watching from the.
Oh, yeah, they were watching live for sure.
Live stream. I was like, that's crazy. I thought we'd see. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this. This is the Dylan guy that I've often watched. He so beautifully recaps it and kind of gives all the pieces to it. It's only about a minute and a half long. So here, do you guys have it?
That's great.
There you go.
I give up. I give up. I don't know how to inform you guys anymore. These last 2 days have just been... Remember, keep in your mind, this has been about 48 hours for all of this. We all wake up on Sunday morning hearing that the US has joined the war, bombed Iran. Holy... We start losing our minds. Everyone's thinking, how does Iran respond? We then hear other reports and they're saying they've got sleeper cells in the US and they're about to launch terror attacks. The State Department, they're like, yo, every global citizen of America, watch out. And then while we're hearing all of this, we get news. Iran has already responded. This is Monday night. We start losing our minds again. We're saying, it is begun. But then, just like an hour later after that, we find out, these strikes weren't so bad. Iran notified both the US and Qatar that they were going to launch them. No one got hurt. And Trump was like, you know what? I'm not even going to respond to this. He then tweets, congratulations world, we can now have peace. And then in the most bizarre thing that no one expected, he was like, Iran and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire just hours after Iran attacked the US. And so we're thinking at this point, oh my God, ceasefire, sweet, World War III averted. But then I wake up and... Israel's military claimed that Iran has already violated the ceasefire and launched missiles at them. Iran has said, no. We denied this. We didn't do any such thing. But Israel already saying, no. Yes, you did. And they have already ordered powerful strikes on Iran again. So we're back to the beginning. Like last night didn't even happen. I'm already struggling with putting the dates. I refuse to put the times of the videos and the dates. For all of you watching this post in
when was that video put out?
That was this morning.
Okay, so I want to give you, here's Trump's reaction.
Oh yeah, because now Trump's responded to that.
Well, this is his reaction to about the ceasefire.
Yeah, about how they violated it.
The ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to cease?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
It just walks away.
Feels very
but this is him getting pissed off because he's laser focused
his peace prize
or what. But
that's funny.
The issues with, and that kid that was talking earlier, what people don't get is how the ceasefire is working. First, Iran is coming in at 12 hours and then Israel's coming in 24 hours later. So people didn't understand the time frame.
Yeah.
And the one missile that he was saying that didn't hit a apartment building in Israel and killed like families.
Yeah.
So so it definitely hit, and you don't shoot off a ballistic missile by mistake. It's not that's your pocket dial someone.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, it was a bizarre thing. You know, most people, you know, I kept getting messages like they're shooting. I thought we had peace. It's like no. Read the message, put the timeline, do the time change to their periods. Yeah. It's 9 hours apart. So you got to think about that. So. So it was a bizarre thing, but it's but again I think the conversation about the government there and the regime change, I think that's one of the most important things, because you see Persian people celebrate that government's fall around the world. Like you don't see any protests pro regime. It just doesn't happen outside Iran. right? It happens even inside Iran, and that's when the government tries to kill them, tries to, whatever. Iran has like the Islamic regime there has like a morning hour where they execute people, and that's and this is one needs to be.
You're dealing with evil, actual evil,
pure evil, right? And it's pure ideological evil.
100%.
Like there is no other like rhyme or reason to it. It's like we have this like religious fanatics, and this is our belief to hold on to power. Everyone else will just, if you don't agree with they'll just kill you. And you can't create peace with that, right? You can create peace for a week, for 2, for 3, maybe a year, but you're gonna be back to square one because they're gonna rearm themselves, they're gonna rebuild everything. This is just what happens.
Well, it's such a deep-seated belief.
Yeah, there
might be a tactic where they temporarily come to the table, but it eventually will come back to what the belief is, and the proof is in the pudding with this. So if you look at Iran pre-1979 and you look at the country that it was and how progressive it was and opportunistic, and it was actually going in a direction, or what was a direction, it was a beautiful country. And then the IRC came in, or the IRGC came in and completely changed the country to what it is, where it executes people, holds on to power, they call for the absolute annihilation of Israel, death to America. Like in Parliament a couple days ago, they were lighting American flag on fire, chanting death to America. The Western values, Western systems, right? That's not what they want, and they've forced and they have persecuted and they have hurt their own people through and through. Like it is anti-freedom. Yeah. If you actually think of what freedom and democracy actually is, and not just democracy. I want to maybe get into that if we have time, but not just freedom, but it's just the state of the way that people live. So you have to, I think it's important to remember that, because a lot of people can get confused when they state Iran. They think of the innocent people of Iran, but you also have to separate the IRGC from the innocent people, because they're also victims to this too.
The IRGC is essentially the military of the Islamic regime. That's why I call them the Islamic regime, because they're Ayatollah driven. That's what they are. It's pure Sharia law by definition. That's what they try to.
I was reading all about it, and it's wild. I sent you and Paul a screenshot. I threw in all the details and just said, like, considering everything happening with Israel, Iran, and the United States getting involved, if you, knowing everything you know about both sides of this story, and you have to pick a side to support, one sentence response only, what would you support? I'm not saying ChatGPT is like the be all end all, but it literally said, I would support the United States. ChatGPT. Like, and I think it's, which is, that says something. Like,
it's what people need to understand about the world as well. Just, now that we kind of have more of a clarification of how they operate, when you enter into agreements, like peace agreement, whatever, in the Islamic world, they have something called taqiyya, which is allow to lie for the sake of Islam. So for them, like, me and you can do a handshake deal and walk away. We know it's going to be on it. But for them, it's like, no, this is just, we're just pretending it is momentary because it's going to benefit me later, or because I'm doing it to benefit me in whatever, 6 months, a year. So you got to understand the full like aspect of its functionality. And I don't think the West really understands it or operates in that way. And, like you said, they've been, the Islamification of Iran happened with the Islamic Revolution in the 1970s. And they've been preparing for this moment today for 50 years. The West doesn't think in 50-year periods. No. So the Islamic expansion is happening. Like, you brought up Iran, how it was before. Like Lebanon used to be called the Paris of the Middle East. It used to be a Christian country. The Islamic expansion happened there. The Islamic expansion is happening in Africa, and there's like literally whole villages of Christians being slaughtered every month. It just doesn't hit the news in North America. So I think probably one of the most bizarre things that happened during this conflict is this rise of the far right. I don't even want to call it the far right. The bizarre right into U.S. where it's like, we don't need to involve ourselves in any global conflict. This isolationist view is just so bizarre. It is so American, but it's people that have probably never even left the state. But one of the things that people don't understand, Iran is a big global terror sponsor, but they also work directly with Venezuela. And one of the biggest funders and funnels of illegal immigration across the board into the U.S. was via Venezuela and Iran through South America. So people don't think that they have, there's some country somewhere out there that, we're never going to visit, so it's not going to touch us. No. Those countries, there's like a mosque opening like every day into U.S. is because there is an intent for it. We see what's happening to UK. We see what's happening in other parts of Europe, and it's not by chance. It's because there is an intent and process and action for it. And I think there was Fox, CNN, whatever. They'll catch illegals crossing the border with Mexico. And it's like you have people from the Middle East, and they're like, where you're from? It's like, I'm from the Middle East. They'll say this and that. And it's like, well, how would you get to the Mexican border if you're from the Middle East, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, let's just start putting two and two together.
You use the word the isolationist view, because I want to touch on briefly what's happening in the U.S. within maybe the MAGA movement a bit, because you have, like, some people might argue, I mean, maybe tell me your take on this. You've got these people who love the U.S. and what it stands for, but it's an isolationist, meaning let's just stick to ourselves, let the rest of the world do what it does. It's not our fight. You've also got the opposite of that within still the Republican Party, commonly referred to as neocons, right? Neoconservatives, which is maybe former liberal, smart thinkers and whatever, but that are people would call they're wartime hungry. It's the machine. It's that military machine that is also finance war, and maybe there's a lot of money power behind that, which there is, but at the same time they feel that it's America's obligation to intervene in almost anything around the world. So where do you stand in terms of the balance of isolations versus those neocons, which would be on the opposite side, like the Mitch McConnells? And
I think the title and the description of the neocons have been over what's the word for propaganda?
Propagandized?
Yeah, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. Something. I think that's been I'm more worried on the isolationist side, because one of the things that's happening, and it's mostly social media driven, it's almost non-existent on the ground floor. This is actually an interesting, I think, pivotal part to the Western world in general, because we react so much to social media. But if you look at a lot of the isolationist, the conservative, the whatever accounts into US, a lot of them are not even American accounts. A lot of them are like anonymous accounts. They're like, I'm red pill, I'm conservative, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of them are Pakistani run. They're not even Americans. So you see this side that's pushing this narrative against the war especially against, I guess, the Islamic regimes by non-North American actors.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a lot of bots, and a lot of the Iranian and RGC accounts, like on X.
I've been seeing that a lot.
Yeah, are Pakistani run.
Like even I jumped into a comments yesterday on one of these things on Trump's speech, and like there was like hundreds of the same comment with like one variation of a word.
And you look at the accounts, and it's like brand new accounts.
This is all fake. Yeah.
Yeah, or dormant accounts.
They follow nobody. They have no posts.
Yeah.
I was like,
and they only wake up when you put keywords in, or there's key people tweeting something, right?
Yeah.
So they try to amplify messaging. So I think we need to really separate this part, because there's like a really big psyop happening in the West, and we have no way to protect ourselves against it, right? Because we allow anonymous accounts, right? You charge, that's why I always say for Twitter, for all those platforms, like you have to charge $1 a month, $1 a year minimum for it, because then you have at least a credit card, a bank account, you
verification.
have verification for some.
I would be completely in agreement for that.
Totally.
With the amount of social media and the like, psyops are real. The fact that you've got so much influence, it's become the what's the word I'm looking for? We're in the soapbox in the street corner, right? Where the public place where people talk and all. You need to verify that, because it has so much influence on every election. It has so much influence on the way people think. You look at it as generations, as young people rise up and they start listening, they're being indoctrinated by their social media.
Yeah. It's insane. Remember, I don't know if you guys remember, like, but last year or a year and a half ago, like on TikTok, it went viral, like to Osama bin Laden letter, and how Osama bin Laden wasn't a bad guy. And it's like, sorry, what?
Yes, I
Where
remember.
did that come from? Right? Like, and it's like, first of all, they didn't put the whole letter out. They didn't put it in context. But it's like, how? Yeah. Like, where did this originate, right? It has to originate from something to spark. So, I always say the Western world is going to fall on its free speech absolutism because the other side doesn't believe in it. So they're using what we believe and protect against us. Yeah, so we need to make sure that we have a way to identify those players that try to throw things into the flame against us, and we have no defense mechanism. So the problem with this isolationist rise in the West, or especially in the conservative side, which appears to be conservative, which appears to be American, most of it is none. This is why you look at the ground floor, very little amount of people actually get impacted or persuaded by it because they don't see day-to-day life. And then they go on social media and they look at a few influencers that went to Qatar, and they come back and all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's not do anything against the Islamics. They're calling for our death. It's like, sorry, what? What just happened on this trip?
Because obviously, like, I always try to make these types of examples much more smaller. And for example, if we were witnessing these things happen, let's say we're all in a schoolyard and it's happening within eye shot where you can see it or hear it, what would you do? And if you had the isolationist viewpoint, it's not my problem, don't touch. I just watched some woman get punched in the face by a man, not my problem, I'm not going to deal with it. No, it's like, no. I would expect you as a grown man to go and protect that woman and go do something about it. Now, obviously, it's much more complicated than that with countries and wars and.
But I think this is a good analogy to play with because the route that it goes into is making your own citizens give up about protecting their own future. You stop protecting the Western world. The Western world will start getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which already is. Yeah. Right. So this is the issue, because the question you have to ask yourself, where does it end? The U.S. is not isolated. There's 20 million new people have been immigrated there in the last 5 years. So it's the people that you think are over there are not over there. They're in your street, right? You have pro-terrorism marches in Canada into U.S. nonstop. It's like, do you not see that, right? It's like the isolationist viewpoint is completely over. And it's fear-based, right? It's like, this will start World War III, this will start World War III, this will start World War III. And they've been wrong on every single aspect of everything, right? Yeah. Nobody came to protect Hamas, no other terrorist group. Nobody came to protect the Houthis, no one came to protect Hezbollah. No one is coming to protect Iran. Nobody is going to die for terrorists. It's just the way it is. Nobody in Russia is going to die for it. Nobody in China is going to die for it. It just
because even Russia came out and said, "Not my war." Like we're not. Even though there was a huge amount of hype saying that Putin's going to back him. I can't think of the guy who's the leader of Iran.
Ayatollah, supreme leader.
Yes. So they said that he's connected to Putin and that Putin's going to back him.
Well, they signed in the January of 2025. They signed some sort of military agreement. Did they not? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, but it didn't include any defense.
Okay.
Clause.
And so then Putin made an official stance saying it's not my war. I'm not touching it.
Yeah. Nobody's going to die for the world. It's such a devolutionary world, right? Nobody, and it's playing out in the last few years. What Israel has achieved is really like absolutely critical for, people think war is not necessary or, scary or whatever. I agree in general. It should be the last thing that happen, but sometimes it's necessary because the other people, Hamas has spent 20 years building tunnels and rocket systems into their population instead of building their future civilization. They're preparing to destroy people. They're not doing it because they want to improve their life. They're there to destroy. They're literally living to destroy other people's life. Same with Hezbollah. Most Lebanese people want nothing to do with them, but it's like a big cartel over there that's taking over the southern part and taking over other aspects of it. And the same thing with Iran. The people want freedom, and women are getting executed because they're showing their hair, because they're dancing in the street, because they're listening to music, and you can't have peace. You can't have civilization with those people. And there's actually kind of a few big interesting projects that will come through the Middle East that might be quite fruitful in turning it around. So from the economic side. So.
And Iran, would you agree that was the center of all that when it comes to obviously Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and all this? So the instability in the region is that if there actually does become a peace deal and they actually stick to it, or a complete change, which is interesting. Trump did make the comment saying he doesn't want that, doesn't want chaos, he should say.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. So
the metaphor of the I guess war, the rising line, speaks to the pre-Islamification of Iran, which there was a line on the flag, right? And that's symbolic to the people that want the regime to go away.
I see.
Yeah.
Where do you think it goes? I'm not going to hold you to it, but where do you think it goes over the next 10 days, month, 2 months?
I think the war will continue in one way or another. Like there's no, you just...
With U.S. involvement? Because Trump did say to Netanyahu, don't expect any more help, essentially, as of today.
What we've seen being said in the media sphere and what happened in the background has been very well played and crafted by both administration, right? Because while they were, I guess acting out one thing into the media, into the world, on the other side, they've cooperated and worked really closely together to get rid of the regime and the terrorists and all that stuff. The risk part for the U.S. is the U.S. does have bases in the Middle East, right?
Yeah.
So the risky part for the U.S. is when Iran, at the beginning of the war, Israel thought that Iran has about 2,000 long-range rocket missiles, right? Ballistic. So they bombed a whole bunch of them away. They've used a whole bunch of them on Israel. But what they have is short-range rockets, which is within the U.S. bases distance. So that's the risk for the U.S. is, okay, how desperate is their regime going to get or suicidal that they'll just shoot out the rockets at our bases?
Yeah. Well, and there obviously was an attack on one of the bases close by, which there was Canadian troops at as well.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any evacuations there, but there's also no reported casualties.
They apparently gave them a heads up. Before bombing.
It was a very political,
it's such a weird trade-off.
But it's
symbolic.
It's very symbolic, but symbolism in the Islamic world is super, super important. So we don't really have much association with that in the Western world.
Okay.
But even streets are named after certain things there. Like it's like names, last names, and all. So
essentially, they couldn't get hit without having to hit back, right? Like symbolically
it's a very we can flex this way too kind of thing to show some kind of strength.
Because Prime Minister Mark Carney mentioned that even though it was retaliatory, it kind of wasn't. I'm paraphrasing. He said it was almost a way to get back to the table. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, what Canada is saying and what Canada has been saying on this is, a complete farce and a joke, right? Remember, just even the war with Hezbollah, with Hamas at the beginning after October 7th, Canada will trip over themselves on every Hamas propaganda that was released, right? The hospital was bombed that killed a whole bunch of people. No, it was their own rocket. And it didn't even hit a hospital, it hit a parking lot. But Canada throughout this war has been tripping over themselves, falling over propaganda, and that just really talks to the inexperience that we have in this government, to the inexperience that we have on the global stage now. They have no idea what's going on in the Middle East. They have no idea what's actually happening really anywhere in depth. So this is one of the kind of almost weird part and a little bit of scary part, because we also trying to bring people in from there without having any real boots or organization on the ground. So we don't know background checks and all this stuff. Because remember, the only people that can essentially at the beginning afford or have a way to leave out of those places are people that are connected with governments, connected with the insiders, with the terrorists that we're trying to get rid of. So it's kind of a risky situation in Canada. And Canada has designated the IRGC as a terrorist group last year.
That's right.
And after trying to get it passed for years, which it was voted for on as well, and nothing to be done. And remember, we haven't even kicked a single person out from a single IRGC operator out of Canada since we designated him as a terrorist group. We didn't go after a single penny of money laundering, after a single property, not even a single person. So we have full parts of the Iran's Islamic terrorist regime government operating out of Canada now, which is really bizarre to be in. So, because
would we be aware of that, or CSIS or Canadian government be aware?
We're 100% aware of that. We just haven't done anything about it.
What?
Why would that be?
I don't know.
Like, yeah,
it's you
who do we need to ask that question to?
Yeah, we need to start asking that question.
Maybe Mark Hardy, maybe CSIS.
Anita Anand.
Yeah, because it's a bizarre thing. Canada now essentially, ranks as one of the top Western radicalization countries in the world. Like, we have still ISIS people coming back to Canada. We arrest every other week someone that's radicalized and plans to do a terrorist attack, and that's with the help with the US. So we don't have a lot of even capabilities by ourselves internally to stop any substantial attacks.
Yeah.
So we're in this weird position that we have done nothing to stop terrorism within Canada or terrorist operatives. And then we try to comment about stuff halfway around the world, but it's like, no, the people are in our backyard. Let's deal with those first.
Crazy.
We got to probably wrap in a couple of minutes here. One last question for you. And Prime Minister Mark Carney is at NATO. There's a NATO summit right now. And he's made announcements about joining Rearm Europe. And there's also a couple of comments you've put out on your X regarding Canada's cozying up to the EU style of, not necessarily style of governance, but just the EU in general when it comes to, is that going to have an effect with Donald Trump's approach on Middle East, Iran, Mark Carney getting closer with the European Union style and what they're doing? Is that going to have any effect on trade, do you think, with Canada, trade deal, tariffs being, or is there going to be some friction there? Thoughts on that kind of, I know I'm getting some scenarios, but it feels like there's something brewing. I'm trying to have you can help us articulate.
So I'll post actually about a part of it later on, but I think there's two things here. One is the military, one is the economic side, and they kind of touch together. So remember, NATO, the target for NATO was 2%.
That's right.
Canada has never met that. Yeah. Right? We essentially bubble gummed our military. 50% of our hard assets are not operational. And when the war with Ukraine started, we essentially emptied all of our warehouses. Even like old stuff from 1980s that doesn't really work, we sent out to Ukraine so they can use it, pick parts, whatever else. If they can make it work, bless them. So Canada has
so Canadian.
It's like, even the Arctic guns that we just ordered did not work because they ordered the wrong guns, like for the cold environment. So
this is crazy.
Who pressed
stuff,
order
man.
the wrong Amazon order? They clicked on the wrong product.
Refund.
I mean, they ordered the wrong tents too for the cold climate.
Gosh,
so,
we got to look into that.
How do you know all this
Paul,
stuff?
let's make a note of that.
How do you know this stuff?
That.
How do you stay in touch with this stuff?
Oh, well, I know people on the inside.
It was Kirk.
But
I know.
Darn Amazon scuffing again, but yeah. So it's it's a bizarre incompetence there. But what's interesting about the US, remember the BRICS countries are getting really strong. This is why China has been so defensive and almost aggressive in this whole tariff talks. So the Western world is entering this rearmament phase, which is kind of interesting. It's probably the biggest rearmament phase since World War II.
Yep.
Canada has no choice but to spend money on the military. Like it just, we're just falling apart. It's just, we can barely use our military to fight forest fires. Never mind like someone else, like some other army.
Well, especially watching what the U.S. just pulled off. Like it was the most American thing ever. Did you see all the videos of them bragging about how it went down and the planes never landed in 37 hours of straight flight and no one recognized it and no one was hurt? And I was like, they were really flexing their muscles.
I got.
But also, it's impressive.
I gotta admit, like the discipline you have not to use those toys. Like if I had those, I'm like, oh my god,
just go for a cruise.
That's right. I'm like, who said what about me? Death? What? Let's take the first. But
you know what does amaze me though is. Think about never being used. Like imagine you were trained to fly that B-2. Never, and you fly it, practice it. It's very expensive. It's very expensive to run, and you have to be so trained and know how to handle all the crazy circumstances that go with it. And you never, ever, ever, ever use it, ever.
I know, you just fly from Missouri to Arkansas and back.
Yeah, but you have to be ready. You have to be ready to go all the time, no matter what. And when that call comes, boom, they're in the air, 37 hours, ready to go, no issues, flawlessly pulled off. It's like, to have that level of training and prep and gear ready at all times, I'm like, when you really break that down, it's crazy.
I know, it's pretty phenomenal.
It's incredible.
Yeah, but I would use those buggers all the time. It's like, who said
Friday night cruise with the wife?
Who said death about me? What, in that village in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan? Picked up a call. They're
just
gone.
Dropping
they're gone.
Busters.
You were saying so about the Canadian military, just junk.
Yeah.
Until the comparison to B2s.
It's insane, right? It's funny because one B2 is essentially costs just over 10% of the whole Canadian military budget, which if puts in perspective, it's
and they launched 7 of them. Was it 7? And 2 of them actually they were decoys. They had five decoys.
They went to Guam.
Yeah, they had 4 or 5 of them like split off, and the real 2 actually went for what they're doing. And I was like, that's so.
And
badass.
Guam is where they tested a lot of huge bombs and nuclear bombs. Right? That's why they gave Guam. They're allowed to move to the U.S. whenever they want, because sorry about your little area in your island, but it is a green card. But
it's a green card.
But the NATO part is actually a very interesting situation. So because Canada's going to move to 2%, which they already announced, Mark Carney, but the NATO target now is 5%.
Yes, right.
And everyone agreed on it.
Yeah.
So think about how many billions upon hundreds of billions of dollars that is. And that was Donald Trump's demand. He wanted the countries to move up to 5%, and everyone agreed to it, except Spain, which will take their time, of course. But it's a huge movement. But one of the reasons that you see Mark Carney is cozy more to the EU in regards to trade is a little different. Let's remember, he spent all his life essentially living there until the last like 10, 20 years from his professional career. It was Bank of England, and he worked with a lot of environmental stuff out there. So Europe next year is implementing the carbon tax for global trade. So the carbon trade mechanism. So when countries, and that carbon tax is essentially designed to equalize environmental spending in different countries. So if you don't have carbon tax in your country and you want to import something to Germany or whatever, you're gonna have a carbon tax on the product. So it's like a tariff, which is ironic because everyone gets pissed off about tariffs against Donald Trump, but then they're putting a carbon tax tariff next year on all the trade into EU. So, and this is something that Mark Carney has pushed on for a long time. And he campaigned on it, right? He campaigned on industrial carbon tax. He hasn't implemented that yet. So you got to ask yourself why. And he's waiting for those relationships to come through because he wants to put a border levy on carbon tax as well.
And then so Canada, obviously, it feels like we're non-consequential in the grand scheme of the world wars that's potentially brewing. But you also mentioned the military side and the economic side. With Canada cozying up to EU economically and militarily, you're saying? Or is it just militarily? And they're trying to figure out the economics with US?
They're trying to do both, right? Okay. So he's trying to pivot some trade into EU. And some months Canada has outputted more trade with the EU, especially to UK, mostly around gold stuff, resources.
Is this just a shifting reliance kind of from away from the US onto the EU, which is not really focusing inwardly in terms of your own ability to produce and be self-sufficient? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the EU has done the same mistakes that Canada has.
Yeah.
Just for a little longer. They went down this environmentalist path. They went at the expense of the economy. They start shutting down coal plants. They start developing things that don't have the same reliability and cost. Obviously, the war with Russia and Ukraine started, so they start cutting off Russian gas. which driven the prices up through the roof. Like the governments, they're subsidizing a lot of industrial aspects of it. It's just not functional. It's not sustainable. So the EU needs energy. And in the last few years, they actually went around the world and been looking for energy. They came to Canada. Justin Trudeau said there is no business case, as famously said. And they went to the US. The US is outputting record amounts of gas because they made those contracts with the EU and other countries that Canada said no to for no particular reason than politics. They went to Qatar. So the EU has created a lot of 20, 30-year long-term resource contracts. They're just not coming on the market just yet, but they will. But they need to develop that internal aspect of trade and development and industrialization. The Western world cannot survive, especially Canada, cannot survive on service industries. We're really thinking that we could have, be this high class and not get our nails dirty. We have to have industry that's essentially is the fundamental building block of everything. So, and that's where China has been brilliantly executing over the last 40 years. They went to Africa, they went to South America, they started cornering into critical mineral supply routes. They're one of the only countries that can foam up lithium for batteries and everything. So they took over whole monopolies of future industries 40 years ago, while the Western world was, riding their high horse, having their latte and thinking, oh, we solved everything in life. It's like, no, you missed the end game. And China has invested heavily in it. And Canada has the potential. Remember, when the Liberals have gave out over $50 billion in potential subsidies to EVs and battery plants, it was under the premises that will create a closed loop supply chain. That never happened. We didn't even approve a single new mine. So we need to create it. We have this potential. We just need to actually get rid of our own red tape. Nobody's stopping us except us. That's the weird part about Canada.
Yeah. And that's the journey to get around it. Well, I think we should wrap Jared.
Yeah, he's an encyclopedia.
Well,
it's amazing.
The thing is there's so much, there's no real solution. It's just there's lots of things going on that we're exploring that's happening in the world, but also in Canada. But these conversations are good because it gets people thinking deeper. And that's why we love having you on, because you bring in a lot of the depth that most people won't even find in the headlines or even in most news articles. But anyways, man, appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us.
Good. Yeah. That's it for today.
There's a lot there. Hopefully there's not many updates to come on this situation, but we will keep people posted.
We'll see if the peace talks hold. We'll see you guys next time. Show goes on.